I think there is universal acceptance that the pandemic tested people's agility, their resilience, and their ability to constantly reinvent with a fail fast kind of mindset. These traits, along with work technologies, in my view, is what has ensured organizations remaining functional. Well, the pandemic's not behind us, but when we look back at what's going on today, the HR landscape certainly has undergone a drastic shift. Next generation technologies that help facilitate work in remote mode have actually gone from being something of an experiment pre-pandemic to becoming essential for survival. These technologies and disruptive digital innovations that we've been coming across, in my view, may have a long-lasting impact beyond the pandemic.
Great.
The pandemic, ironically, yeah. Sorry, The pandemic, ironically, has also thrown up, in my view, a number of positive developments that I can see getting embedded into business models and organization culture. And I'd like to just call out a few over here. The global shared experience of adversity has brought empathy to the forefront. Organizations had empathy as a value, but never have we ever seen empathy being at the forefront and being demanded as an accountability from the leadership team. There's been a significant increase in personal interactions. With traveling restricted, leaders and employees have been able to virtually participate and familiarize with each other, regardless of the location, position, or experience. Whether it is connecting with a senior leader in a town hall, participating in a team-building fun activity, brainstorming through a virtual meeting, or in fact, as we've often seen, introducing your family or pet to your team members. Virtual platforms have helped build and, interestingly, subsequently develop a deep socio-emotional connection that might not have been as effective or viewed as essential in a pre-pandemic era. The unfair advantage some may have enjoyed being close to the center or the headquarters has diminished, and in my view, created a more even playing field. And I see this facilitating greater internal mobility, internal recruitment. There is greater awareness of the interdependency of functions and therefore the need for collaboration, albeit online and remote. Conferences, meetings, and in-person events, which were the norm for many businesses prior to 2020, have been replaced by virtual alternatives. And to your question, Vijay, I see some of these trends as somewhat irreversible. However, they will require technology if they are to be embedded into organization. So the robustness of the technology or work tech that organization invests in is probably going to be a key differentiator going forward.
Great, and that's a great segue into my question in terms of when we've always had HCM systems and for a period of time now. What do you think is the fit of some of these legacy systems for the future of work as you see it?
Yeah, good point, Vijay, because organizations that did not have some level of HR automation really struggled and had to implement HR platforms in double quick time. An interesting development that we have witnessed during the pandemic is that legacy HCM systems were suddenly under the spotlight. And it was not just HR who was experiencing the trials and tribulations of the system, but suddenly the entire organization was. Modules beyond payroll and admin, for example, learning management platforms, onboarding, engagement, and PMS or performance management systems, to name a few, suddenly became essential for survival. But these, some organizations discovered, were either not fully integrated, or were clunky to use, or simply just not robust enough. We all know that historically, a number of the better known enterprise systems were originally designed to serve finance or primarily for the benefit of the employer, with payroll, attendance, and basic operational transactions being the focus. However, the need now suddenly was work tech and the employee being at the center. Not all systems were able to adequately provide the new functions required because these were required to support the new work arrangements. And I'm not even talking about mobile or mobile capability or UX or EX. Fortunately for organizations, new disruptive bolt-on technologies are available in the market. So there was a huge scramble for these bolt-ons, and we saw a lot of that happening. The post-pandemic business reset, in my view, requires HCM systems to respond to the new business realities of hybrid work, online collaboration, and real-time employee engagement. An important development in the HR tech market, as you know as much, more than I do, is the mounting focus on the overall employee experience, or EX for short, and the growth of HR tools designed specifically for employees, not just for finance, HR, or monitoring systems. Going forward, I think HR's demand for technology will focus on sustaining and scaling processes. And just to name a few key ones, in my opinion, processes such as internal recruiting, onboarding, hybrid learning, and virtual teamwork. HR tech is now producing technologies that you can talk with, chat with, and interact with. So a lot of exciting developments happening in this area. Back to you.
Yeah, and it's a great segue in some sense, Ashok, into as we reflect on our journey as a part of the WorkTech family at Darwinbox.
Having given you my take on what businesses will expect from WorkTech solutions and your extensive work experience, I think it will be good for you to share with us how a new age WorkTech systems like Darwinbox enabling the future of work.
No, it's great that you picked that up, because we saw a sudden upsurge in the demand for platforms like our own at Darwinbox with the onset of the pandemic. Because as you correctly called out, the legacy systems were not able to match the need for speed and the need for a new age feature set that the pandemic sort of threw up in terms of remote working and everything that came with it. So as we've reflected on the way the pandemic has played out, and we tried to do some trend spotting into the future, we see four themes really that have come to the fore. One is really what we call omnichannel talent, right? Meaning that it's not just one traditional view of external recruitment as a basis for fulfillment and workforce planning. We see a very omnichannel view emerging, where whether it is driven by the employee's need for what we are seeing as flexicurity, which is flexibility with security on one side from their perspective, and the fact that you have talent pools now with remote working that can be anywhere. So it's boundaryless. You have different types of work arrangements which are now available, whether it's through different types of contracting, the gig models, the internal employees, and so on. And to your point, where this really leads us is the fact that obviously you need, along with the focus to also manage the great resignation, far more focus on really leveraging the internal talent pool, whether it is through the marketplace concept, internal gig options, as well as the other options out there. What does this mean from the perspective of the friends in IT as well as HR working together? It means that we need to have the ability to define, administer, manage, and then dynamically keep updating the policies for all of these type of segments from a workforce perspective. We need to straddle, balance it out, and bring that right method of autonomy or flexibility with a certain order. Otherwise, it could even become chaotic and anarchical to sort of manage. So that is one first trend. So how WorkTech platforms like Darwinbox are really helping this is through the ability to personalize through just configurations from the front end without any coding and so on. And this comes from the ability to have thought through the connect to very customizable workflows, form design architectures, user groups, and so on, by which you can almost come down to policy administration and definition at a unit employee level, while being able to manage that scale. The second trend really is on talent unification. So one of the points you did mention with the legacy systems was the fact that they were not very integrated. So with what we've seen with work tech platforms like Darwinbox is that the entire hire to retire lifecycle is unified, but at the same time, because of a microservices approach, it's also very modular. So we are able to attend to individual parts of the HR lifecycle or the talent lifecycle. At the same time, have the data seamlessly flow and the transactional flow happen seamlessly from one module to the next. As a result of that, the ability to unify talent, and with some of the new initiatives like the talent unification, which Pratyusha will quickly show us, we're able to get that one view of talent or a talent 360. So all aspects of an employee are now unified, and we're able to bring that together very easily to take decisions and make plans. The third theme, which I wanted to talk about, is democratization of HR. So more than anything else, I think the managers were also heroes along with the HR and IT teams through this pandemic, because they had to manage their teams in a virtual environment, manage the work requirements as well as the unpredictability of what was going on demand and supply, and handle the entire emotive angles of mental health, pressure, and productivity expectations and all that. So the manager and the employees also to some extent are the new HR and will be the new HR as you think about it, right? So how we can empower them, enable them by two things. One, reducing the time that they have to spend on routine administrative transactional activities. Just make more time available for them by taking away some of that pain on the transactional side. And at the same time, now that the denominator is a little easier to work with, on the numerator, can we load the ability for them to use their time even more impactfully with every employee that they have to engage in terms of very specific insights, inputs, trends, feedback, so that they're able to engage that much more effectively, in addition to giving them the time that they would otherwise not have. The last theme is really one, you mentioned it in terms of EX or employee experience. I think the pandemic and how it's playing out really emphasizes that employee experience is not just anymore about the form and the feel good in that sense, but a far more deeper emotive connect to their teams, to their organization, right? So we found the need coming through for very clear two-way communication and a collaborative employee listening approach where they feel like they're part of the entire story on framing policies, framing the way of working, etc., rather than just being recipients. So I think in addition to the traditional aspects of EX, I think culture reinforcement, motivation elements, reward and recognition on a virtual dynamic basis, which is more peer-to-peer, not just org to employee, is becoming far more important. So these are four themes, I think, which we're really seeing coming through. And that's a great segue for me to pick up with you, Ashok, that when you look at with all of the effort that HR and IT have put together to come to the forefront of the decision-making table and the strategy almost of the org, what do you think are the capabilities they'll require to keep that place and consolidate that position that we have now seen HR and IT take at the strategic table?
Yeah. No, thanks, Vijay. I think the trends were very well articulated by you, and clearly, the fact that the employee and the manager are the center of everything that's going to happen in organization is abundantly clear to everybody. Having said that, the good news, and I often smile when I hear the word proverbial seat at the table for HR, or rather say the proverbial elusive seat at the table for HR. I think at the moment HR has the entire organization's respect, and therefore must capitalize on this opportunity to cement its leadership position. The function's response to the pandemic has clearly demonstrated its ability to be agile and to be able to come up with HR initiatives aligned with business drivers and not HR for HR's sake. So wonderful spot to be in. While the size of HR teams in terms of HR teams to total headcount ratios may have shrunk, I feel the width of the HR profession has definitely increased. Yeah. So if I was to, have say one thing for HR teams, it's clearly, hey, HR should stop retreading yesterday's ideas. Okay, and it can be very tempting to continue with, why change something which isn't broken. Uh, During the pandemic, I think HR did an outstanding job of addressing the immediate challenges as they were encountering them here and now. Okay, HR now needs to make HR transformation more aligned with business drivers and make transformation an ongoing process and not a one-time episode. And the reason I say that is the new normal has opened multiple dimensions on how we work, and that gives HR the ability to be creative rather than continue with incremental change. HR should therefore seek investments in technology, and hopefully where they sit today, budgets may be slightly easier to get approval for. And everybody has seen the usefulness of HR technology. So basically seek investments in technology that enhances the HR team's reach, effectiveness, and capability to use data analytics. So they can come up with initiatives that positively impacts the organization's overall productivity and drives business growth. And if we can do that and continue to demonstrate the understanding of business drivers that HR has demonstrated during the pandemic, I think that's probably the best thing for the profession and a wonderful new development for organizations in general. Back to you.
Well, there were some fantastic points there, and as I reflect on what you called out, and also connected to some of the points that you brought out in the first part of your inputs on hybrid learning and so on. I think three parts of what we are as work tech providers like Darwinbox really focused on is really one, how we can build the entire focus on skills and capabilities far more cohesively across the hire to retire lifecycle. So today, for example, if we see the standalone systems or the legacy systems for that matter, or even the point providers, they have a view of using skills and capabilities at the recruitment stage for performance management, for learning, but they don't necessarily talk to each other. So as far as the employee is concerned, there is a bit of a disconnect in the way the whole thing plays out, and for the users or consumers of that, from the perspective of people who are designing processes around these, again, you have a discontinuity. So we are trying to see how we can stitch that part together. The second piece that I think we are very focused on, and this will be of particular interest to our friends from the IT world as well, is we recognize that there are some very specific boutique providers who are providing around the world of EX today some very specifically important tools. For example, folks who are doing work on employee assistance, given mental health has come up as such an important dynamic post the pandemic. So we are very clear, because of our open API architecture, that we're able to integrate with some of these providers, and we'd like to provide an equivalent of a first level marketplace, or at least what we call the EX value expansion network, by which the employee experience beyond just the hire to retire touch points that we cover can also expand in some sense to cover some of these elements which shape and are likely to become even more important for employee experience as we go along. So while we internally strengthen the platform, we're also wanting to co-opt, in the spirit of an ecosystem, some of these value providers. Obviously, architecturally, the idea is to almost make this plug and play for IT teams and HR teams to be able to use this very easily and very quickly. The last part is we would have observed through the pandemic that collaboration tools like Zoom and Teams and so on have almost become the new operating system. So we are also actually looking to integrate very closely with these tools so that people are able to operate their HR transactions through the new oasis of the future, which is the collaboration landscape itself. So we are hoping that with some of these pieces, we can, in some sense, reflect the new normal and help organizations as well as their consumers, namely the employees, really move forward in terms of the future of work through work tech. But fantastic thoughts, Ashok. Thank you so much.
Yeah, with a great roadmap for Darwinbox going forward.
Absolutely. And on that positive note, I'd like to introduce my colleague Pratisha to walk the audience through certain aspects of the talent management and how we as Darwinbox are seeking to enable business outcomes through talent management. Pratisha, over to you.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for that, Vijay. I think between you and Ashok, we've derived a lot of insights today. So I think what my part for the rest of the session today would be around giving the whole actionable around the insights that we've looked at so far, which means that through the platform of Darwinbox, we'll be showcasing to you as to how you can implement some of these insights or suggestions that were shared in the first half of the session in your organization through the platform of Darwinbox. So let me start presenting and then get started as to how we at Darwinbox have built the product in terms of meeting expectations for today as well as for the future in terms of talent management. So if you can see my screen, this is the landing page for the Darwinbox product. So it's a cloud-based SaaS platform, and it is completely SaaS in terms of how you would not need any other additional infrastructure to go ahead and start using the system as an employee, as a manager, as an HRBP, and also as a leader. So in today's session, in the upcoming, I think 15 to 20 minutes, we would be covering all the inputs in terms of how do we help managers or business leaders get all of the talent related information in a single view, which can help them take business decisions and drive the metrics forward. We will also be looking at how can we cater to multiple performance philosophies. So we talk about how agile the system can be in terms of applying maybe a management by objectives or objective and key result sort of performance philosophy or competency model and so on and so forth. We'll also look at how the system is easy to use from, let's say, a mobile adoption perspective or timely inputs, nudges, and any sort of AI that can be used in terms of predicting employees' future needs or succession readiness or other talent related aspects. Lastly, we will also talk about how all of this is switch on, switch off in terms of configuration. As Vijay mentioned, I think the idea is that any IT or any HR person should be able to tweak and make these policies dynamic in the sense that today, if you need X and tomorrow you need Y, system should be able to cater to your changing needs as and when they come along. So that's how we have planned the upcoming 20 session, followed by which any questions that you leave for us in the chat, we will take those as a group as well. So to get started with, this is the landing page of the Darwinbox system. And today I'll be using the instance loosely based on the show Game of Thrones. So if you're familiar with that show, you will see quite a bit of characters from that show as well. And most or all rather of the functionalities from a performance and talent perspective are heavily centered around modules like performance, talent management, and recognition as well from a larger overview of talent as a marketplace, along with recruitment and onboarding. Primarily focusing towards talent management as a piece. One of the views that I'd like to start off with is what we internally call as a talent overview or a talent profile. So we spoke earlier in terms of how systems need to be integrated with each other. What that means is I don't think that no longer the modules like performance module working in isolation, whereas let's say a recognition working standalone in a different system and your core remains on certain on-premise or cloud, while that kind of a model is still existing in a few companies, but the direction in which we want to move in is where all of these comes together in a single integrated system. And owing to the nature by which Darwinbox is built, which is using microservices and on the cloud to begin with, what we can leverage on is the fact that each module talks to each other in a seamless fashion. And more than anywhere else, that is embodied in this particular page, where as a manager or as an HOD, every input that I can possibly need from an employee perspective, it could be, let's say, something that is performance related or not in terms of maybe their core data or recognitions. All of that is centralized in an interactive visual format through the talent profile. So let's quickly take a look of the different parts that together form a mosaic painting. So one of the key inputs for a talent profile would be the data coming from the core or the HRIS module. Aspects around when did the employee join the organization? What are the different roles that they have served in the future? And internal to the organization, if you have any kind of talent pools, aspects around is this person touted to be a future leader or they are a high pot employee, all of those aspects will also be captured in the same screen. System is able to give you a quick summary of the number of languages, learning plans, competencies, and recognitions the person has achieved. And you can also look at it in a deeper fashion down once you scroll down. One of the key elements would be around where they typically fall into a grid, and even down to the dimensions of this particular grid of both axes, the system is configurable. So if you internally follow a 4x4 or a 3x3 or a 5x5 or any combination, you can configure your own grid with your color coding as well as the terminology to make for it to make sense internally. So the idea is that everything should be contextual to your organization so that aspects around adoption or application really become simple going forward. So through this particular 9 box, I can see that this particular employee's last assessment placed them in this grid, which is one of the best places to be in from a performance and potential standpoint. On the other hand, from a learning module, employees also currently part, let's say, of 5 learning plans, out of which 2 are on track and 3 of them are delayed. So this particular input is coming in from the LMS or the learning management system module. So this is where I was talking about the integration from multiple pieces. So if the particular employee NetStar has a certain educational background and different types of learning history, all of that is centered around the same space as well as the languages that this particular employee can speak. From a talent perspective, some of the indicators that are quite relevant while doing any decision around talent management, around succession, around job enhancements, or even promotions, all of those are color coded. And as with the other cases, it's not just about the standard fields, but also anything contextual to your organization that you want to capture. For example, I've used something like domain knowledge here. So you can add your own elements in terms of indicators as well as attributes into this particular screen. Competencies, and this is something that we will also touch upon in our performance philosophy section. Whether you follow more of leadership competencies, technical or functional, what are the competencies tagged to this particular employee's role? What are the expected behavioral indicators for that? And what is the last assessed actual proficiency vis-a-vis the expected proficiency for any employee? So it gives me the to be state, the current state, as well as the gap, which allows for individual developmental plans to be contextualized at an employee level. You can maintain compensation inputs either in isolation or in comparison or relative to an internal or even an external benchmark as well. My last updated goals, competencies, all the rewards that I have received, which could be certain nomination based, like an employee of the month award, or could be something, let's say, like a spot based award, which employees are recognizing each other on the fly. All those are also visible in the talent profile. So apart from looking at the traditional quantitative metrics like performance ratings, achievement percentages, and so forth, I also have a view to a holistic picture of what do peers think about NetStar, or what do, let's say, people in another department think or feel about NetStar. So it gives me that perspective as well. Lastly, from a work experience standpoint, it gives me a detailed journey of the employee within the organization in a snapshot as well. Again, auto updated from the core HRIS, and also the different types of career paths that are currently available or recommended for this particular employee. So all in all, this printable document becomes that reference for any manager or business leader to go ahead and take any sort of decision from an employee talent or even an employee growth or career development perspective. So that's one of the elements that we wanted to showcase from a product perspective. Moving to the second bit from a performance philosophy aspect. So one of the things that I think both Vijay and Ashok touched upon is the requirement for a system that is changing as per the needs of the organization, and not just from a time perspective, but also from a space, which means that if, let's say, you have a set of employees which are, for example, large manufacturing, and you have a lot of focus in terms of quantitative metrics, which are, let's say, sales driven or metric driven. For those set of employees, you might want to go ahead with the objective and key result approach. Whereas, let's say you have a set of employees which may be in support functions, for example, an HR or an IT, where there is enough focus on not just what is to be achieved, but also how has it been achieved. And typically for an IT or an HR person, the goals are not something that change year on year or quarter on quarter. It's more about the competencies. Whereas from, let's say, a growing organization or within a mature organization also, teams that are currently expanding maybe exponentially, or those who have targets which could be changing quarter on quarter, but the objective remains the same. So for that kind of a user group, an objective and key result or an OKR framework would be a lot more relevant and will produce better business results as well. So the system should be able to cater to both of these scenarios and more if required, like purely competency-based assessment or an assessment which is completely democratic in terms of choosing employees' bonuses and performance rating purely as an average of feedback coming from multiple stakeholders, like a 180 or a 360 or so. So Darwinbox is a platform that is configurable in terms of performance philosophy, which means that an MBO, an OKR, an MSF, all of these philosophies can parallelly coexist within the same department and within the same role as well. So to help you visualize what we just discussed, this particular goal plan that you currently see on the screen is a sample for a management by objectives framework. So this is a traditional performance philosophy in which all the aspects around, let's say, the metric or let's say target, all of these are captured at level 1, which is what we refer to as SMART goals. And in this particular philosophy, the sub goals or the level 2 are mostly elements to track progress or milestones which are captured to capture the steps that we are reaching through the course of achieving this SMART goal. And what is also mentionable is the fact that when we talk about goal cascading down the line to the last employee in the hierarchy, or when we talk about reviews and assessments, all of this happens at a goal level in the MBO framework or the management by objectives framework. So if you look at this particular goal element, it has aspects around target, balance scorecard pillar, alignment to a parent goal, which could again be either a department goal, a company goal, or even my manager's goal, and any other metric that you want to include. So the goal template is again configurable by user group. So let's say for leadership, you want to maintain something like a quality indicator, whether it's a managing point or checkpoint, you want to maintain something like a scorecard pillar. All of these fields are switch on, switch off again at your end. So this is how, let's say, a sample template from an MBO framework looks like. And this works, like I mentioned, to the traditionally followed performance philosophy like an HR function or an IT function or certain leadership roles as well. If you'd like to add a behavior element to this template, you could also make use of the deep competency framework available in Darwinbox. So this is again not restricted per se to performance or reviews, but it flows to continuous feedback, which we will also cover. It flows to a 360 or 180 multi-stakeholder feedback. It flows to reviews within performance, and the competency framework also flows to individual developmental plans or succession readiness as well. So all in all, this becomes that yardstick or fundamental tenet based on which you're going to be hiring, you're going to be looking for competencies. And when making any decisions around promotion, succession, bonus, review, you can also look at the metrics around competencies. So system allows you to create your own contextual competency dictionary, along with naming the competencies, defining as to what it means for your organization internally, defining multiple scales around that. It could be aspects around, let's say, a 1 to 5 scale or a behaviors based scale in terms of beginner, proficient, expert, and so on and so forth. And at each stage, you could also define very clearly articulated behavioral indicators. So for any employee who's going to be looking at their particular competency, they know that they are going to be assessed at this particular highlighted level. They're expected to operate at this stage. And the same applies to the managers who are evaluating as well. So the idea has been to aid the managers and the reviewers as much as possible to make the assessments more transparent, more predictable, so that there are no surprises on either side, and to make it as objective as possible. So this is another element that you can introduce to your performance philosophy from a competency framework perspective. Whereas in comparison, if we look at another employee called Cersei, this person within the same department is on objective and key result framework, which means one of the main changes in the template is that in an OKR template, the objective or the level 1 is usually something visionary. It is not smart, as in it's something with more to do like a medium term or a long term goal. It's usually around improving top line, becoming number X in the industry or so, as a sample. Whereas the actionables are typically the key results or level 2. So if we have a key result called market penetration or a key result called revenue, that becomes the actionable in a particular OKR template. And what that means is the smart nature around targets achievement are mapped at a key result level instead of at a goal level, and the cascading to people down the line, or let's say the evaluation and feedback happens at a key result level. So what this means is if you have an agile job in which the metrics are changing quarter to quarter, but the direction remains the same, you will be much more benefited by an OKR template. Whereas if you have a job that is fairly mature and standardized in terms of goals, and the idea is only to reach the planned out milestones, you would be better off with an MBO framework. And that brings us to the key elements from a cascading perspective. So the idea is that irrespective of what template or what philosophy that you choose to implement in your organization, in either of these scenarios, any employee or manager rather can go ahead and cascade their goals down the line in the organization. And what this does is it's a multi-level cascade, which means that if I've gone ahead and delegated my goal to, let's say, 4 of these employees, anytime they update the achievement, my achievement in the system also goes up. So at any point of time, my achievement is a combination of my own achievement as well as what has been achieved by everybody that I cascaded to. So this multi-level roll-up gives the kind of insights to the department heads or to the BU heads or even to managers who have multiple reportees. So at any point, I have sense of a leaderboard that what was it that was cascaded to, let's say, Sansa Stark, how much of it has she been able to complete, and what does that mean to me? So I can easily read a simple table like this to understand that 28% of my target is going to be coming from Renly, out of which he has currently achieved 93%. So this way it also gives me that multi-level rolled up aggregated sort of metrics at any point of time to track my results on real time instead of finding it as a surprise at the end of a quarter or worse at the end of a year. So these are the two performance philosophies along with competencies that can be exercised in the platform. And in addition to this, another way to make the process objective and easily transparent is also to use integrations through other systems. So Vijay spoke about how the platform is built on microservices. And what also is an advantage is the fact that we have open ready APIs, which means that if you have a large sales staff who have specific metrics and they're working on those, then instead of asking them to update once in the CRM system and then again in the performance system, Darwinbox has a capability to pull those achievement metrics from the CRM system and feed it into performance. So what this does, it keeps your performance on the HR system as real time to sort of aid the whole seat at the table in terms of business discussions. More and more, you will see that your HR system reports and analytics are being used in business reviews. And what it also does is it makes the adoption easier. So I'm not doing as an employee any entry twice. It's getting picked up from my daily system to the HR system. And to take it a step forward, you could also go ahead and set out an achievement mapping matrix that looks like this, which means you're removing any sort of subjectivity in evaluation. The moment my achievement percentage reaches around 80 or above 61, system is able to allocate to me a 3 rating on a scale of 5. And similarly, if I touch, let's say 111, I get the highest rating. So this way, for certain metrics at least, which are purely, let's say, quantitative, measurable, which have no element of subjectivity, you could use this particular feature called as custom achievement matrix, so that you're removing the subjectivity from a manager perspective and you're sending a clear message to your employees that X effort or X achievement will directly result in Y bonus, which makes the whole gamification aspect or the chase of the higher metrics and stretch targets as much more fruitful within the organization. So this is from an achievement matrix perspective. Moving further beyond the performance philosophies part. So let's say we've defined what is the philosophy that is required for my company. We've set aside a goal template and we are doing reviews. What we will also realize halfway through is that it's not enough to do either a quarterly or an annual review. Often we need very real-time updates for us to get a glimpse of where are we falling behind and for us to take that course corrections at any given point of time. And there are a host of continuous performance culture facets available as part of the Darwin-Box talent management module, primarily in terms of continuous feedback, check-ins, performance journals, which help you not only track the quantitative, but also appreciate the qualitative inputs. So one of the key metrics or conversation holders is something that we call as the performance journal. So here is where against every employer performance journal is maintained in the platform. So one, it maintains the entire goal log, which means any update, which could be quantitative or qualitative. It could be a deal closure, it could be an update, or it could be simply an edit to a particular value where my achievement has gone up from 50 to 100 or vice versa. So this maintains a timeline against each of these metrics where you can clearly trace out the journey of an employee during the performance cycle on a real-time basis. And more interestingly, it also gives you the opportunity to go ahead and give any kind of conversations, which typically managers do over a cup of coffee or on the way to work or so. But the idea is to sort of keep all of that, especially in remote workforce environments, onto the system to eliminate any sort of recency bias or any kind of, let's say, recency effect and in terms of subjectivity. So you can either do comments or let's say notes for yourself as a manager saying that NetStar missed a critical deadline, or it could be two-way conversations, which means that you are letting your reportee know that this was a great job and they are able to respond to it saying thanks for the feedback, but what can I do to improve this? And then on record you can have a conversation with your team member saying that I think you should shadow this person, you should take this training, and then they can acknowledge that feedback has been shared for them as well. And anonymously, which is invisible to the manager and reviewers, we also collect a quality of conversation rating from the employee saying that, hey, looks like your manager has had a conversation with you. Do you think this was constructive? Do you think this was useful? And the anonymized data averaged across departments is shared with the HOD, that at any given point of time, there are 10 conversations that have happened this month, and 8 out of 10 employees perceive to be useful. So you are tracking not just the traditional metrics around what is the EBITDA or profit, but also are managers and employees talking to each other, and more importantly, are these chats being perceived as useful? So that's a game changer in terms of the way we look at performance, from transactions to really driving cultural change within an organization. And of course, from an adoption perspective, all of this, what we've covered, is also available on the mobile platform, which makes this very easy to use and improves your adoption numbers as well. So that's more from a performance journal perspective. And speaking about mobile, we could also take some time to go ahead and look at all the functionalities that are there on the mobile platform as well. And before that, all the actions that you want to run around across all the modules, since Darwin-Box is an entire hire to exit sort lifecycle HRMS platform. And today, since we are primarily focusing on performance and talent, aspects around, let's say, updating a certain goal achievement or viewing my goal or cascading my goal, giving feedback to each other, giving rewards and recognition to each other, all of these can happen from the chatbot in the system. And on the mobile, it also acts as a chat as well as a voice bot, which is artificial intelligence enabled, which means it can hold a conversation with you. It can be responsive, and as you speak more and more to the bot, it understands your pattern in terms of how you operate different systems as well. So just let me share my mobile screen for us to look at this piece as well. So this is a quick glimpse of the Darwinbox mobile app. As I mentioned, right from notices to your core lifecycle, HR documents, recruitment, performance, travel and expense, compensation and payroll, benefits, and everything that you need over and beyond an HR system also in the form of, let's say, help desk, engagement surveys, any other surveys essentially, and analytics around each of these aspects, do it yourself workflows, project management, all of these are available on the app as well as on the web. Focusing again, like I mentioned, on performance specifically, you can use the chat and the voice bot to run several transactions for you. And it also enabled with voice to text functionality, which means that I don't necessarily need to type in a lot of things. The bot can respond to me just through the power of my voice. So let's just look at it. Give feedback.
Please mention the name of the employee to whom you would like to give feedback.
So the bot is responding to me. So I can say, for example, that I want to give to Arya Stark. So it allows me to choose that particular employee. And this is continuous feedback that any employee may give to any other. So it could be peer-to-peer, top-down, bottom-up, in any direction. So I can give a particular context to it. It could be something like yesterday's webinar, it went well, I want to appreciate. Or it could be something like quarterly performance input. And you can go for as a generic as feedback, a pat on the back saying good job, or you can make it a lot more pointed and specific, which means that as far as the KPIs or the goals that Arya is working on, I can introduce those, let's say overhead cost reduction. As far as skills that are mapped to this particular person's role or competencies that are mapped, let's say like problem solving or effective presentation, I can pick and choose between those inputs as well. So let's say I want to talk about Arya Stark's presentation skills. I can type it or use voice to text again. Excellent presentation skills. So data collection becomes really simple, and this voice to text that we've just demonstrated extends to any workflows, confirmations, performance reviews, 360-degree surveys, performance process feedback, anything else that you want to push to employees can be enabled by voice to text, or of course you can type it down as well. So it's as simple as that for me to go ahead and immediately give a certain feedback to any particular employee on the platform. And all the feedback that we have given to employees and the feedback that I have received, I can go ahead and check under the continuous feedback piece. So let's say if I want to look at where do I fare as far as presentation skills are concerned, it gives me a sort of ranking board similar to what you might have seen in, let's say, an Amazon or any sort of e-commerce platform. It gives you that out of 12 people, I have been rated on an average 4.2 by 5, which is not bad. And it also gives me on basis of recency, on basis of inputs that have come from different stakeholders. And if certain feedback has not been good, or if it has been good also, at each point, I can go ahead and initiate conversations with others. So at every juncture, whether it is a check-in, whether it is a continuous feedback or a journal, each of these are one-on-one based. So I can go ahead and respond saying, okay, it looks like you've given me a 2 on 5. Do you have any suggestions for me to go ahead and improve in terms of my presentation skills, which is what I think Vijay also mentioned from the point of view of, the psychoemotive construct of ensuring that an employee is heard and their opinion matters and is not just somebody at the end of the line who's going to be just on the receiving end of any comments coming from anywhere. So this is something that you can actively seek feedback from my project lead, from, let's say, my reporting manager also. So just to ensure that I'm on track, from my HODs, from my peers, from my reportees, to ensure that am I being a good manager to them or not, and pretty much any other person that you would have worked with on some capacity. And as a manager, you can also initiate such feedback requests for your team members so that by the time you're doing a quarterly review, you are aided with several such holistic inputs that help you to take an informed decision in terms of the employee performance rating. Moving to the operational aspects around, let's say, adding goals, doing different kinds of performance check-ins, reviews, all of that is available on the platform as well. And from a recognition standpoint of view, if I want to go ahead and, let's say, recognize any particular employee, I want to learn more about a particular program, I can do that. And any recognition that I'm making for, let's say, a particular employee, I want to go ahead and recognize Sansa Stark as an example. I can define under which program I want to recognize this person, choose elements around what are the values against which I want to go ahead and raise this, include a certain recognition card, and then go ahead and recognize this person. So this is a quick glimpse of all the aspects from a performance goal plan, reviews, 360-degree feedback, check-ins, and any other elements that you'd like to do on the mobile. We are one of the only global HR systems that allows for goal settings, quick performance check-ins, detailed performance reviews, and project-based reviews all on the mobile. So you ideally need to come back to web only for, let's say, something like a calibration or dashboards and so on. And this is how quickly you can go ahead and update your goal at any point. So if I want to move my achievement from 12 to 50, give a comment saying ABC closed, milestone achieved. That's all it takes, less than a few seconds for me to go ahead and update my performance metric in the system as well. So that's a bit from a chatbot as well as a mobile perspective. Coming to the end in terms of defining how do we go ahead and make the process more engaging for the end employee. Primarily, we'll cover two aspects around this before we take questions. One is the dashboard and the other is the individual developmental plan. So quickly running through the dashboards, different ways for employee-based and manager-based dashboards in the system from a persona perspective. One of the key elements, apart from giving them a consolidated view of all the things that we have thus far seen, like critical incidents, continuous feedback, journals feedback, probably one highlight that I'd like to call out here is system is able to give employees personalized suggestions, which are smart. So particularly for NetStar, since a goal is delayed or a learning plans are delayed, a system is able to nudge them contextually and personalized way that, hey, one of your goal is delayed, do you want an update? Or 4 goals are less than 30, do you want to update today? And the same thing applies from a manager or an HOD perspective as well. So it gives the HODs not just the trends in terms of achievements, conversations, feedback, but also easy insights that I hope you notice that 30% of reportees have achievement greater than 75. And what can I do about it? Do you want to quickly nudge the 9% reportees whose goals are at risk? So I can immediately trigger that from the same screen saying send update or send action plan before, let's say, end of this week. And all those employees would then receive a trigger saying that, HOD has asked for an update, only those. So you can do contextualized focused actions through the dashboards as well. Lastly, let's say we have looked at a talent profile. All the inputs that we have so far seen have been covered in depth as well. From this point onwards, aspects around what could be the different career paths. So if I'm looking at, let's say, an employee who is a bank teller in a bank, what are the different career paths that open out to them by way of competencies, by way of career lattices, and inputs around what are the gaps between my current and desired, and what are the specific learning activities that system is able to recommend for me to reach to being, let's say, a credit manager. And this is where, again, integration happens between performance, competency frameworks, as well as a learning management system. So Darwinbox is able to fetch different programs and inputs from your learning system, map different types of learning paths, and then incorporate it into the IDP to create a contextualized, a personalized, rather detailed individual developmental plan for every employee, one to do better at their current job, but more importantly, so that they are ready for their next job. So that's how the IDP or the individual development plan and career planning works as part of the Darwinbox platform as well. So to quickly summarize, we today essentially covered the different performance philosophies, how configurability plays out in the system, the different tools that help you to do continuous performance management, and a lot of these functionality or all of employee and manager functionality being available on mobile as well. and system using artificial intelligence to make personalized nudges to help conversations with a bot to make the system that much more user friendly and adaptable. So that's from my end what I primarily wanted to cover. Over to you, Vijay and Ashok. In case there are any questions for me, we'll have a look at those as well.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Pratyusha. Very interesting demonstration there, and huge range of very rich features. Particularly impressed by the bots and tracking of conversations and others. A few basic questions and some detailed questions. So if you all three of you are ready, let me just go through them very quickly. Time permitting, we'll go through them. The first question says, any reports where Darwin box has been mentioned, any recent reports where we can access them? I think, Vijay, this might be your area. Go ahead, please.
So I think happy to inform you that Darwin box is Asia's only headquartered and the youngest entrant into the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So we are referenced in Gartner, and we also have the highest ranking in the Gartner Peer Insights. So clearly, Gartner is a source where you can clearly learn more about Darwin box, not just from Gartner but also from our respective client base. Almost 250 out of the 600 plus clients have given their insights. So that could be a great source for you to look through. In addition to that, I think we are fairly well covered on the internet, and please visit our website darwinbox.com for any further details that you'd like to.
Okay, great. Another question from a user asking, I understand this is a cloud-based application. Is there any role that the IT organization needs to play to set up the front-end templates or anything? Go ahead. Anyone, Pratyusha or Vijay? Or
Pratyusha, maybe you want to pick this one.
Sure. So I think that's a really important piece that you've mentioned. All the aspects that I covered today in terms of how do we design a performance template, which performance philosophy that we choose, what are the different platforms on which we want to exercise aspects like continuous feedback, what is the group of multi-stakeholder feedback that we want to run, forming these calibration groups. So on an end-to-end basis, typically where we see IT gets involved is not just in terms of evaluation, but they play a crucial role during the implementation of any system from a change management perspective and ensure that all the systems are talking to each other. And whereas Darwin box doesn't necessarily need someone with a technical knowledge, we do have clients where HR system is managing the system, but it does help to have people in the same space, which is the HCM space, to also go ahead and manage the configurability or the admin self-service of the entire platform, not just for talent, but across the employee lifecycle.
Great.
I think the other place where IT becomes informed is, involved is in the data, to ensure that the data that flows into the system and call out of the systems that we want to integrate with. As Pratyusha said, if it is important for the CRM system to flow into the HCM from a performance perspective, calling out those integration requirements, the connector requirements, and the data flows is also where IT plays an important role.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. Now, a little bit more detailed question, probably maybe in Ashok's area. What are some of the challenges with talent management in a hybrid mode? Ashok, I don't know, maybe you would like to take this?
Yeah, sure. I think there are going to be quite a few challenges, and that's where I think technology will be required, for the HR teams to manage them. While I said empathy is on the forefront, managers, have done a, tremendous role. One mindset of, I want to see my employees at the workplace, and how do I monitor them if I can't see? Unfortunately, I think it's probably not going to disappear. Here, I think both HR and the CEOs will need to come in and reinforce the fact that the senior leadership of the organization needs to truly walk the talk and live the values that organizations say they believe in. Okay, so I think that's one key mindset that we need to be careful about, and not assume that the various challenges that we had pre-pandemic are suddenly going to disappear. Just because we've been through one hell of a torrid time over the last 2 years. I think I think Vijay talked about the fact that employees want to be heard. Okay, so in terms of talent management, giving employees the empowerment and a chance to speak up, chance to interact amongst themselves. So the Darwin-Box, tool Vibe or Facebook at Work, those are communication collaboration tools that I think HR will need to continue to, populate, and in case they're not getting enough traction, ensure that employees really get engaged with that and continue to interact with one another on a one-to-one basis, and also use these tools for remote collaboration. Okay, the third one is self-learning. Okay, we've been talking about a learning culture for decades. Okay, we now have the tools to ensure that self-paced, self-managed, gamified digital learning is possible. You can decide, you can learn on the go. Okay, but here again, okay, we need to make it exciting and engaging for employees, because you're competing with a lot of stuff they have an option to engage with digitally on their mobiles. Okay, so how do we ensure that employees continue to be attracted to these? How do we ensure that, like Netflix, okay, which keep nudging you to move on to the next episode or to the latest thing that's been posted on Netflix, okay, so you're attracted to go there. So I think there's a lot of stuff that talent management still requires, and HR has a lot of work to do. But without technology, I think HR would struggle. Okay, so these are just a few examples that I can raise. I mean, from an IT perspective, okay, coming up with platforms that provide some degree of monitoring, okay, without stepping that line of the creepy privacy issue, okay, is something that IT needs to grapple with and find a solution to. Okay. Also, while we talk about talent management, I want to also highlight the fact that as we have a more distributed workforce, okay, IT systems are getting a little vulnerable because they're actually expanding and they were opening themselves to employee-owned devices where, cybersecurity, so you are getting exposed. So let's not underestimate the challenges that lie ahead. And I hope I've answered the question that you had, which was posed to some extent from both an HR perspective and some extent from a IT perspective.
Sure, absolutely fascinating answer, Ashok. Thanks very much for that. And we're running short of time, and I would now invite you to give your key takeaways. But before that, I'll quickly slip in a question over here. So Pratyusha, this is something which you could answer. So what are some of the new age talent management tools? I think obviously in Darwin-Box, go ahead. I think you showed quite a few, but probably you can just summarize them just for this, for the question.
So I think some of the things that we could also not cover in the short demo, that's something that I've seen that recently quite a few employees also use, is aspects around multi-stakeholder feedback. So whereas I think even probably around 5-6 years ago, it used to be a tool which is only used for certain select high potential employees. But more and more new age companies we see are using it to get a holistic picture, as long as it is integrated to the goals or it is linked to the competencies. Other than that, I think a lot of focus is around continuous performance culture, so that we are able to get a tab of what is happening to the business performances on a real-time basis, which is tools like continuous feedback, performance check-ins, journals, critical incident diaries, and conversations. So I think these would be some of the new age tools other than the usual performance review processes and goal plans and so forth.
Thanks. I think you very aptly summarized it about real time, and I think you had some great examples there on how you're tracking the conversation. Vijay, one question again popping up: how can the data be moved from on-premise to the cloud? Is it cumbersome? Does it need specialized channel partners? Do you have partners to assist you, or should we just approach you directly? Go ahead, Vijay.
I think the process is quite simple because we work through fairly standard data collection templates, taking also into account the data maturity of every organization. We're able to do this ourselves. We don't need partners. We have an integrations team within Darwinbox, which takes care of the considerations on integrations as well. And where we do need certain specialized partners, we have the esteemed partners like the Big Four and certain other providers who we are also able to tap if the need arises. But we've largely been able to manage on our own.
Great. That sounds pretty satisfying and convincing for our attendees here. So as we're going to close up, I would just like to go through all three of you with some key takeaways. So Vijay, inviting you first, what would you like to leave the attendees with?
Yeah, so I just like to emphasize that this is a great time for, as Ashok said, for HR to take a transformative versus an incremental view of what they want to do with their talent. And technology through work tech platforms like Darwinbox is certainly going to be the way to move forward on making this agenda transformational rather than incremental.
Okay, I'll go next. I think the key takeaway from my end would be to leverage technology that is already present in your org that you're able to get from outside, so that primarily, like Vijay mentioned, your HR leaders or your IT leaders or even managers are able to sort of automate whatever is the transactional day-to-day management work through a system, which gives them more time to have conversations with employees and to check performance levels, engagement levels, and to really build that personal connect.
Yeah, okay, from my end, two things. I think Vijay mentioned the great resignation. And I believe, the good organizations will always attract good employees, okay? How are you going to ensure you continue to attract good employees? Is ensure you're given the best employee experience that, better than what your competitors can, okay? And technology can really, really help you there, okay? The last one, I know, reiterating the whole thing, hey, CHROs, don't let this opportunity slip away. You've got a lot of respect, okay? People believe in work tech now, having experienced it firsthand from the CEO downwards, okay? Get the dollars, okay? Invest it. And to the IT guys, don't worry about integration, okay? It's a breeze now. There's bolt-ons. You don't want to change the whole ERP. Take the modules that make sense, bolt them on, see the difference for yourself, okay, and help your HR and organizations, play catch up with the technology that they've missed so far. Yeah, so that's really my last bit. So
interesting. I especially like that part about IT. Don't fret, and the solution will work. And yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to thank you for moderating this, Arun. So thank you very much, and also big thanks to Pratyusha
for the demo,
and Vijay for the chat.
Thanks to all the speakers, Vijay, Ashok, and Pratyusha. So on behalf of Global CR Forum and Darwinbox and the speakers here, I thank all the attendees for sitting through this hour-long virtual summit and look forward to engaging with you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Many thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.